rely, but we'll count away my internet. The New Orleans internet, since the hurricane's gone through, has been really dodgy. So just remember, if I disappear, the show must go on.
Sounds good.
And I'll be back. Although last week with Heath, the scheduled internet maintenance from Wednesday was actually done on Tuesday. There's no scheduled internet maintenance. But we also had a power pole just fall, and sparks and things were falling from the sky. Our lights were lit. New Orleans infrastructure, So the show must go on, but the show will start now. If you could have just one player for the fantasy football playoffs, who would it be? That and more this week on the couch. Ryan, welcome. Who's the one if you could have one to lead your squad to the championship?
I think this one's pretty easy. It's Derrick Henry for me. It's King Henry.
Yeah.
You shot me over some questions, and I had to dig for some of these answers and really do some research. This one was an easy one. I was shocked to see he already has 1,257 rushing yards.
Right.
I mean, maybe I've missed it. I haven't heard any 2,000-yard talk with Derrick Henry, but I think it's in the realm. And then specifically, you're talking playoffs. Week 14, Jacksonville, They've given up 10 top 12 running back performances so far this season. Week 15, Detroit has given up 8. Week 16, fantasy championships, he gets the Packers.
Yeah.
Maybe the worst rush defense, maybe in the whole league. At least in contention.
Maybe in years, yeah.
They've given up 10 RB1 games as well. If you've got Derrick Henry on your roster, and man, Sig, I've got 25 dynasty leagues, a couple redraft leagues. I don't think I have a single share. So this is, I kind of hate this answer, but because I'm not going to get to profit myself. But yeah, it's Derrick Henry.
I love that because he just has such a presence now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we watched DK Metcalf last night. That's the only other player I can think of. I've been asking folks sometimes, like, what's the most lasting image you'll have from 2020 football? And DK Metcalf is often that guy, although Derrick Henry is dominant in much the same way. And it makes you look back at our classic redraft leagues and wonder, like, why wasn't he just like number 2 overall at least? Yeah. I mean, we saw what he could do. He was in an offense committed to him, and the rest is history. And the Titans have been fun because this is a team, it's really got to be Mike Vrabel and Ryan Tannehill. Like I'd like to say, quarterback, head coach, that's where teams get their personality. And they've got a lot of fight. Because they're not making excuses for them. We're making excuses for other teams, but not for them. But there's other candidates, Devontae Adams certainly is one. He's not showing any signs of slowing down. Travis Kelce, someone might argue Travis Kelce. I mean, even Darren Waller's starting to lag a little bit. Dallas Goedert's coming on. By the way, why didn't you trade Dallas Goedert to me a couple of years ago? No. Right. By the way, folks, Ryan McDowell, Dynasty, and part of the reason we've got Ryan here, it's been a long time coming. We've worked together for a long time. Is because it's Dynasty. This is when I start to write my buy low, sell high column about players to stash for the offseason. It's just time to start looking ahead for those teams that aren't in the playoffs. And also, it feels like this is the verge of a very active part of the calendar for Dynasty leagues as soon as the season is over. So if you don't know Ryan MC23, and DLFootball, Dynasty League Football, it's like the resource, especially if you want to step up Dynasty involvement. Maybe we'll have some more time on our hands this offseason. But certainly this is going to be quite a stretch run as we're holding it together with teams. Ryan, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you're doing really excellent work, always keeping your finger on the pulse. And what I wanted to ask you, not so much as like what you've learned fantasy-wise, because folks, if you're part of the Twitter community, which most of you are, there's the polls. I love these data points, this player or this player, to exactly triangulate where players' value is better than a ranking can. And then just tracking the ADP, doing all of the mock drafts, making sure you have the cream of the crop and the ADP fluctuations as we measure them. But what have you learned? Because I can tell sometimes you'll tweet stuff out and very subtly that you'll be surprised. Like, well, this is it. What have you learned, or what has been surprising about being the person that's there, kind of like the poll taker, to see what's going on in the mass mind?
Yeah, I think I would say probably that I'm reminded, maybe rather than something I've learned, but it's just the recency bias. You know, we've become so predictable, and it just makes me think if you're going against that grain, if you're buying the old, old productive player in June or July that nobody seems to want. And when I say old, it's not even, we're not even talking Drew Brees, Tom Brady. We're talking Keenan Allen. I mean, if you flash back to last offseason, nobody wanted Keenan Allen. Nobody wanted Adam Thielen. Those are just a couple of examples of players that were super cheap in dynasty leagues, that you could have acquired or drafted at such a discount. And obviously those two guys would be paying off in major ways right now. But yeah, we're just, as a whole, we're a pretty predictable group that a player has two big games in a row and now he's a top 10 running back, right? Like I know you're an Antonio Gibson guy. I think that's correct, at least. And he goes crazy on Thanksgiving, and now he's the top 10 dynasty running back. Right. I really like Antonio Gibson. Love the story, love the talent, love the upside. When I look at my rankings, it's kind of tough to get him into the top 10 in dynasty. But he's at least in the conversation. But doing these polls, we do the polls, or I do the polls, basically picking one or two players each week, pitting them against other players at their position. This week, we're looking at a couple of players who are losing value: Marquis Brown and Cam Akers, and it's predictable. Especially Marquis Brown, Hollywood Brown. I think the last time I checked, he was losing almost every one of those polls up against players like Devontae Parker, and I think Robert Woods was in there, maybe Denzel Mims was in there, I believe. So, certainly have soured on Hollywood.
Yeah, that's one. The expectations were so high.
Yeah,
the narrative that he'd be healthy this year, plus that Lamar Jackson would get better. That's going to be an interesting one. Speaking of recency bias, the recency bias as we're colored by the Ravens swoon this year. We'll see what they can come out of. Obviously, more things on their mind. And I'm sorry, as I've been interrupted. I'm actually going to have to go because not a true emergency. Like I need to go pick up a kid at school in like 15 minutes. So I'm sorry that it's the second week in a row that the universe is conspiring. But Ryan and Heath, because we cut off 45 minutes with Heath last week. So I really appreciate all of you too. I'm not going to be able to give you the full hour right now, but we will definitely make this up. But we still have time to talk about some things of the moment and also some things that may be looking more long-term. I wanted to ask you this because I was surprised, Ryan. What do you think Taysom Hill's fantasy ranking has been in his two starts?
Well, he certainly started out well. I know in that first week, I believe he was the quarterback 3 just in that first start, obviously on the back of the 2 rushing scores. Yeah. He had 2 more last week. He's certainly a top 10 quarterback. I'll say QB 8.
Yeah, he's QB 6. Well, it depends on your score. But you got it. You got the answer right in the sense that, like, if people are asking, do I start Taysom Hill or? Yeah. It's not a crazy question. So we're seeing the beginnings because, look, you're a dynasty guy, but you're getting into the playoffs. I know you're in the playoffs in all the leagues we were together. I said that with nothing but love in my heart. It's so funny. One of the things I was like almost phobic about Ryan is like, I hope Ryan doesn't tell everybody about some of the trades I've made in the leagues together because I can just remain secret. That's some of my most embarrassing trades. Yeah, well, like in the league that in Hyperactive 5, like I traded Chris Hogan for Derrick Henry when Henry was like still failing to launch, and Chris Hogan was at the peak of his value. And then like a year later, I traded Henry for T.Y. Hilton. I'm getting this stud that's going to be good for 5 more years, and then Andrew Luck retires, and now Hilton's dust, and all of these embarrassing things. So but you're in the playoffs in dynasty leagues. You still have to make lineup decisions like a redraft player. So Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, all their teams in the playoffs in dynasty leagues, well, 89% of them. But we're seeing them change before our very eyes. Are people overthinking it if they're wondering about Murray and Wilson at this point, or is just it's real? Russ isn't cooking and Kyler's hurt.
Well, at this point, it's likely that you don't have a better option. But
Taysom Hill. What about Taysom Hill? Let's give it a data point. Let's do a data point.
Okay.
Too crazy. Atlanta this week. Kyler's playing Kyler's playing New England. No, wait, that was weeks ago. The Rams. Kyler's playing the Rams.
Yeah.
And Russ is going home and facing the Giants.
I don't think it's crazy to put those two guys in the Taysom Hill conversation. Taysom gets the Falcons again this week.
Yeah.
Obviously some risk. We've seen a huge majority of Hill's points come on these 4 rushing touchdowns the past 2 weeks. But looking at Russ, it has to be a concern where he did basically the same thing last year. The first 8 games last season, he's QB2. He's scoring 26 points per game. This season, even better than that. Quarterback 2, 33 points per game. Weeks 10 through 12, the last 3 games. Still a top 10 quarterback. He's quarterback 9. But his production's been cut in almost in half, 18 fantasy points per game the last 3 weeks. Seeing something similar with Taysom Hill. He goes from 33 to 22 fantasy points per game. Or I'm sorry, that's Kyler Murray, not Taysom Hill. Mm-hmm. But with Kyler, I don't know if it's Kyler Murray issue or a DeAndre Hopkins issue, because his production has dropped as well. So overall, I would say a little more concerned with Russ, because we've seen it before. We've seen him do that before. We've seen them basically turn into a run first, a run second, and a run third team. So I feel a little safer with Kyler because of that.
That's fair. And with Russ, I mean, it's the writing's on the wall. Justin Herbert. Can you remember a more striking value? I mean, I guess Terry McLaurin last year was pretty striking right off the bat. For a quarterback, though, Justin Herbert, it's been just incredible. Quarterback, distant quarterback 3 in most drafts. Yeah. But now he's going to face this weekend New England, who just befuddled Kyler Murray a little bit. What about Justin Herbert? What's your level of confidence with him? Again, a lot of teams are going to be in the playoffs on his back, but do they trust him at least this week?
I still trust him. We know, of course, New England is going to try to slow it down. That's what they did with Kyler, and that worked well for them. Herbert, to me, has become matchup proof. We've seen him in some tough matchups, and racking up the 300-yard games and the multiple touchdown games. And now he's got Austin Eckler back. So if there was a little concern with matchup or a rookie wall or anything like that, I think it's balanced with Eckler back on that team. And the crazy thing from a dynasty perspective is you look at Herbert, as good as he's been, and in some ways it's hard to get him into that top 3 or even top 5 range because of the quality of the quarterback position right now with these guys that we've been talking about, Kyler and Russ and Deshaun Watson and of course Mahomes, and then there's Lamar, and who knows what to do there right now.
That's tough. Lamar is tough just because he said that thing earlier this year where he feels like the defense knows what the play is going to be. So it's almost like he's defeating himself. He feels defeated. And you see that with Carson Wentz now too. Herbert's been fun. He'd be the quarterback 1 if we redid the rookie class now. But I wonder where he would fall in the overall, not that much higher than Burrow, even though I think he surpassed expectations for Burrow this year, just because the wide receivers have been so good. So good. With Justin Jefferson would be the first wide receiver now, I think, among rookies, and he's on that A.J. Brown track. It's been an incredible rookie class. It might even be better, I'm sure. See, I got you back on to talk rookies and stuff when we get to the spring. We'll have to talk about that. So I'll wind up and do quick off the rails things first. First, Ryan, I don't know if I've ever seen you identify. Well, I know you're a Kentucky guy, but identify with an NFL team. Is there an NFL team that's your team?
There's not, actually. That's why you've missed that. I did not grow up as an NFL fan. My dad was a big baseball fan, and being in Kentucky, a big college basketball fan, obviously. So I didn't really connect with football. I mean, I would watch it, if I caught a game, that was fine. But as far as watching football every Sunday, that didn't really happen. Even through my teenage years and my college years. And then when I kind of got out on my own, I got a teaching job, and I teach in elementary school. This is going on 20 years now, or a little over 20 years. And being in an elementary school, a pretty small male population among teachers. So when my first year teaching, there was one other male teacher. We kind of became fast friends, and he would always talk about his fantasy football leagues. And I was familiar with them. I knew the idea behind them, but I certainly never played in one. And eventually he gets me in his league, which was the dynasty league. So that was my first experience with fantasy football, being thrown into the fire of a dynasty league. And kind of the rest is history. I think that was 2002, 2003, something like that.
Yeah, it's about how long I've been avid, like 2001, I think. First office job, 2001. First job. Last thing before we wind up, and I'm really sorry. I'm sorry for Ryan, really, and everybody out there. But I'm happy to get in whatever time we can, and we'll definitely make this up like a rain check, just because I've got to do a quick small family emergency, not a serious emergency, picking someone up for school. It's COVID times. I think everyone's used to like everyone's lives spilling over into everything now. So things get tight. Right. Like you said, you're a teacher, and briefly, I just want to say, teachers should be thought of as heroes who sacrifice themselves for the better of everybody, for the greater good, in the same way that we put up like first responders and military, and because really the secret sauce of teaching is caring about the kids. Like everybody needs as many people in their lives that care about them, and good teachers, and most teachers are good teachers, like really most teachers are good teachers, because it's a thankless job. Like what are you hanging around for if it's not because the connection with other little human beings, younger human beings, and being part of their development, with the handshake being the class, what your material is, but it's really the connecting with another person. Yeah. And I just want to say, like, applaud teachers as far as priorities were straight. As a society, teaching would be a great job. It'd be like a Cadillac job, and people would compete to be teachers, the best and brightest, because it's the most important thing. It's building the people of our country. So first I'll say that. So we'll go on this note. Being a teacher for 20 years, what have you learned about human beings that you think you would not have learned unless you were a teacher?
That's a great question. I think the first thing, and maybe I'm going back to the recency bias here from this perspective too, but the first thing that comes to mind is really just what we've been dealing with over these last 7 or 8 months with our current situation, because in my school district, and I'm sure it's pretty similar to what everybody has dealt with across the country. On March 13th, we went from in school every day to virtual school, to online school, and teachers had to make that transition with almost no warning. And students had to as well. And even more than that, the parents and the families had to make that transition, which was obviously difficult. And we, at the start of this school year, we started virtually again. We were able to get back in person for 7 weeks, and now we're back online, back at home. Our district calls it at-home learning. So just seeing some of these situations, and I've delivered packets and meals to families at their home. And I don't say that obviously for any kind of credit. Every teacher I know is doing that kind of those kind of things. And of course, I meet with my students every day on Zoom. Just the past, actually just today, we got to welcome some students 5 at a time for 2 hours at a time back into our classroom. So it was great to see them back in person. But all of this just reminds me of that everybody has a story beyond what we see, and as from a teacher perspective, I want the students to do their work, and I want them to have their homework ready, or get this, get their report card signed, or whatever these responsibilities are. And when that doesn't happen, of course, I'm disappointed, or I'm frustrated, or there's a punishment, or whatever the situation might be. And then just with everything that we've had going, it's just that reminder, that understanding of Dad just lost his job, and getting a note signed is the last thing on anybody's mind, or they can't pay rent, or whatever things that honestly are a lot more important than taking that math test, or whatever might be my expectation. So really just trying to have that understanding and that perspective that everybody has a lot going on, and hopefully your situation isn't that bad, but everybody has their things that they're dealing with, that we just need to be understanding of.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful message. Well delivered. And, we're lucky to have a lot of people out there like you who say, whatever I can do, I'll roll up my sleeves and help somebody out. Like you said, because we all have our own version of the struggle. But when it comes to fantasy football, especially as you're maybe wanting to take that next step to dynasty fantasy football, Ryan McDowell, Dynasty League Football, and a great follow on Twitter, participate, be part of the hive mind in his polls, learn a lot from the ADP posts and everything else, and maybe get playing a league with him and get your butt beat up. So Ryan, we will do this again soon. Thank you, folks. Everyone out there, thank you. Stay safe. It's a critical time. If we can make it through this time, things will start getting normal again middle of next year. And I look forward to seeing you all out there as we do it, as always, because